Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. I'm your host, Amir, and I'm joined today by Ernest. You can find him at Miami Heat Talk. We also have Martel. You can find him at the Miami Heat Zone podcast. And we have Trent. You can find him at the Miami Heat Network. Plus, we're super excited today. We also have a very special guest joining the program. We have Tobin from the Tobin and Leroy Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate you.
We appreciate
Thank you,
you as
boss.
well. So, Tobin, right now, two important extensions are looming in the next month. One is internal with Jimmy Butler, the other is external with Donovan Mitchell. I think these two events will dictate the direction that the Miami Heat will go this offseason. So I wanted to get your opinion and how you think this whole extension thing will play out with Jimmy and the Miami Heat. We had guests that have joined the podcast in the last few weeks, like David Ramel from Locked On Heat, and Big O say they don't think the Miami Heat are going to give Jimmy that extension. So I was curious about your thoughts on that. And the second part is, do you think Donovan Mitchell will sign his extension with the Cavs? And I asked that because a new report, maybe an hour ago, just came out from Jake Fisher stating that the Cavs are not expected to entertain any offers on Mitchell, Garland, Allen, or Mobley this offseason.
Yeah, I'll do the Donovan one first because I actually just did a hit from my channel on this one because obviously that's I think we all got the same national alert on it, and so I went to the original article on it. This is what I would say to that. One, if you listen to Colby Altman, their president of basketball ops, a couple of weeks ago, he's trying to put a good poker face on it. He doesn't think any of their guys need to be broken up. He thinks everything's good right now. Of course he does. He's got a very talented roster and doesn't feel like he wants to go another direction. I'm sure they could do all the talking into themselves that, hey, this can work with just a couple tweaks. I think that anybody who sees what Boston did, every GM is going to feel like they got the chips. They're going to want to keep all the chips. But the thing with the article that came out is it's an article on their coaching search. And I don't think any coach that you're going to want to search for, especially a James Borrego, who's a hot commodity name right now, who's in the mix for maybe your job and the Lakers job. You're not going to go in there and be like, yeah, but also Donovan Mitchell's not staying. Like, you want to put up a brave front. You want to put up like everything is okay with your organization. So I don't think it really says anything as of yet. I don't think we know with Donovan Mitchell, even with him, liking lake shots of Cleveland. Like, you can't go find the best shots on Airbnb to convince me that Cleveland is more beautiful than other places in the country. Like, that's not going to work for me. But I think that we've seen this, that with Donovan Mitchell already with the Utah thing, like, doesn't like to put the front up. Like, he's the bad guy. He's very much like in the ilk of a Damian Lillard, where he likes to be liked, but I think also likes to pull on the organization. So I don't have any intel on it. I just am not ready to throw the towel in on the Cavs thing yet, because I do think Donovan Mitchell also has to realize, like, hey, can this team actually do real winning here, even if I don't have a harmonious professional relationship with my backcourt, because my point guard's agent is going to try and steer him elsewhere, and they're already probably going to lead to other pieces leaving anyway. Or could I try and work my way to a place where I can play with my very good friend? So I'm not ready to put a pin on the Donovan Mitchell thing yet.
Got it. Awesome. And again, the biggest looming internal extension is the Jimmy Butler piece. So just, do you have any predictions or thoughts on how that can end up? Because there's so many different ways that could end, and there's been always situations. So what's your thoughts?
I have said that if he leaves, I feel like the team that makes the most sense for him would be the Knicks, just because of the Thibodeau connection, his agent, and seems to have an affinity for New York. Jimmy's lived in New York. There's all these reports that multiple teams are out there that would give him the extension. I think that's there's only so many guys who, as Pat Riley says, like, Jimmy's a needle mover. Like, there's only so many of those guys that become available. So of course there are going to be teams that are lining up to say, hey, we'll give Jimmy the max. We'll do all this. I think where the Heat come into their hesitation is, they were pissed that this year that they I think felt like the roster bought a little bit too much into what they did the year before, that they could skate in a regular season, turn it on for the playoffs, and Jimmy was a big part of that. And I think that with him getting hurt, you're just kind of lashing out at the end. Like you're embarrassed because your rival is in the finals, and you just got beat by them in a huge margin, and your players weren't available, and it was a year where you had a record number of starting lineups. So I think Pat will always make these points to call people out in post-game press conferences or postseason press conferences. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to be on the go. I think he just wants his message out there loud and clear, because he only gets a couple cracks at it a year. Like he said in that same press conference, Spo is the voice of the organization. So when Pat gets those couple opportunities a year, he's going to shoot from the hip. I don't know if they've made their decision on Jimmy yet. I think because with them, they are, they got black belts in knowing how to deal with Jimmy, and know that Jimmy can be a bit of a handful to handle at times. But normally the thing that sets it off the most is you didn't give Jimmy your money. It's never been an issue with the Miami Heat. They've always been willing to give him his money. But with his age, his production, and his durability, all the reasons you guys have heard so far this offseason. So I think ultimately my guess is that, and I'm not reporting this, is just my guess, is that I think they're going to end up giving it to him, because I think they want a happy star. And I think that they know there's not many guys that are going to get better that are better than Jimmy Butler. And I think that ultimately they'll feel like a happy star is going to lead to a more productive star. But you never know with Pat. Pat's a gangster, and usually with his aging stars in the past, if I went by past relationships, it hasn't. But this could be different. I mean, because those have bit him in the butt before.
So, Tobin, let's just say that we can't get a guy like Donovan Mitchell. This Miami Heat team has been linked to Lauri Markkanen, DeJounte Murray, and the list goes on. So would you rather us go all in for a whale per se, or maybe just try to reshape the team with high-level role players? Because, we are paying Duncan, Jimmy, Terry, Bam, and then how are we going to make this team, worthwhile for Jimmy Butler going forward?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, certainly if there's not many whales, I think, for them to go out there. I think the biggest shift would be a Donovan Mitchell. Lauri Markkanen, I saw those reports. I don't know how much there will be to that, just because he's another one where it's like, does he really want to leave that situation where he's in Utah? Or is that like, hey, we just think Danny Ainge wants to sell high on guys? And then when you're the Heat, when it comes to business with Danny Ainge, is that really a possibility? Be an awesome move. I mean, he feels like he would fit next to Bam quite nicely, and that would be a fun upgrade for this Heat roster. It may not be like the sexiest big name that you've ever heard, but I think it certainly would be, in the realm of bringing in a Porzingis or a Drew Holiday to the Heat roster. I think it would be that kind of an upgrade for them for sure. So, yeah, most likely the way it's gone for the Miami Heat, the whales haven't worked out. I mean, that's just the facts of it. With I think we're all a little bit guarded with what happened with the Damian Lillard stuff last year. We were all, waiting for every single update, every single minute, and nothing really ever changed from the first report that he wanted to come to Miami. So I think with this one, what'll be different is they're going to want to know immediately, hey, we're going in this direction. And if it doesn't feel like it's going to bear any fruit, they're going to move on to something else. And yeah, probably recraft their roster. They have to. There's no way the Miami Heat can look around at what they did last year, think that it's anywhere good enough, and not reshape some things, even if it is just around Jimmy and Bam.
But are you willing to go all in and give up, guys like Jovic and Jaime and Tyler and all the picks?
For whom?
I mean, like, it doesn't really matter per se, but just like, let's say, like, if they want to go after like a Trae Young type, like, are you willing to go all in? Because that's what we might have to do.
I would be willing to. I think, like, if you're going to go make a big upgrade, I think this is going to be an interesting offseason, because I think it's the first offseason in a while that they have two pieces that aren't Tyler Hero that are going to be more attractive to teams than what typically we've gone into these thinking, oh, someone's going to want Tyler. I think Tyler's honestly probably going to have a pretty quiet off season because, his value's probably never been lower. He missed half the season. He's got a big fat deal. People already had questions about him as a playoff player as it was last year. So I think the Heat know that if they have to go into this, that Jovic and Jaime are going to have to be on the table. But could they do it with a combination of, a Tyler and a Jaime, a Tyler and a Jovic, and then something like that with picks? I don't know if there's any player that's out there right now that's, the Godfather. I don't even know if it was Donovan Mitchell, if the Heat would do that. I think even you saw them last year with Damian Lillard. Like they had, even with whatever the lack of communication was, they appeared to have their limit of what they wanted to really do for him. So I don't think there's going to be any guy out there short of like Joker, Giannis or something really unforeseen that they would do that with. I think it would probably more likely be like one of the young guys they'd have to pick. If I had to give you my opinion, who I'm less thrilled to part with, I'm a Jovic guy. It's nothing against Jaime. I love Jaime Jaquez, but if I had to pick one guy that I'd love to see his future bear out with the Heat, it would be Nikola Jovic. But they're both ballers, man. I mean, they both had really, really impressive seasons, and I think that's why people are putting this narrative on the Heat that their stuff is a lot better this year than it has been in years past.
Great points, Tobin. Really some good stuff there, man. And I like how you're talking about some young pieces like Nikola Jovic and Jaime Jaquez, because that kind of segue into what I wanted to ask you. Now, I know we're talking about Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell, other different guys about free agency, but we got something happening before free agency, and that's the NBA draft. So I know you hear a lot of names out there. You got big guys like Zach Edey, Kel Ware, Kyle Filipowski. You even got guards like Devin Carter, Jared McCain, Isaiah Collier. I'm just curious, is there anybody that sparks your interest the best for this current Miami Heat team, this roster currently assembled?
I'll be fully transparent with you guys. I'm not a huge draft guru type of guy, but with the Heat going, getting bounced, I've just started diving into the prospects. So I have been looking into Devin a little bit. Obviously, that'd be really, really a cool story because of his father. He knows everything that goes into the organization. Be the first Miami-Dade player to ever get to get drafted this decade. Hasn't been one since Tim Hardaway. Wingspan for days, little bit of a weird looking shot, but has been effective. His scoring went up through the roof. But I just think if you were able to get him, and that's going to be a tough question because it does seem like his stock is rising, and I don't know if he'll necessarily fall to Miami. That seems like a perfect type of fit just because of point of attack defense, perfect role into that point guard mode where they just need more there. They need, they need some guy to fill that void. As far as the bigs are concerned, I would, Ware is very intriguing. Shot blocker, I definitely think that there's elements there that you would love, but there's part of me that's like, he ain't going to play this year though. Like I know how Spo is with his young bigs, and I don't feel like he's going to give him a crack. So I'm going to lean towards, with the Miami Heat still being in the spot of they're going to try and contend, I'm going to lean towards, do I think this guy is going to play anytime soon? And with Devin Carter, that one just seems like it would make the most sense, even though he looks like he might be out of their range, and Ware seems like a little bit more of a wild card. Like he's like all over the boards. I don't know where he's going to end up landing. And the other thing is, I don't know him. Again, I'm just hopping into this. What I'm reading is maybe some motor issues, maybe some hey, I don't know if you can get the motivation. First off, if that's the case, the Heat, even if, I think they're going to have him in for a workout or have had him in for a workout. Boom, right away, the Heat are going to be like, hey, if you're going to come in here and you're going to back up Bam Adebayo for any minutes, or you're going to get minutes, you have to play balls to the wall. You cannot bring in a guy who's up and down like this. And so I don't know. I don't know if they have time for a prospect like that, which is where maybe somebody like Edey falls into it, just because he's polished. He kind of just stays steady like this, even though maybe he's not as flashy. They also seem like sometimes the Heat get into a trend on certain drafts where, like, hey, they had success with Jaime. They kept saying he's not a typical rookie. They liked how that worked out for them this year. Does Adam Simon and the front office, do they go back to that well of, oh, let's go get a more polished guy. Let's get a 22-year-old. Let's get a guy who's got a couple more years under his belt, as opposed to the project like Nikola Jovic, who you saw the leap, but it still took a year basically and a half for Spo and injuries for Spo to truly give him an opportunity. And that even still in the playoffs was like not all the way arms wrapped around Nico being there. So if I had to guess, like, based on where they're at and the coach, of course, you guys see how the draft board falls, like, guy like Devin Carter makes a lot more sense to me than some of the big projects, even though you could even probably argue that that's finding legitimate big backups to help this team is probably a bigger need, but it's just a matter of coaching trust.
What's going on, Tobin? Once again, appreciate it. So, I have a few questions for you. It's going to be like 1A, 1B. And so, going back to like free agency and, Russell Westbrook has been thrown. And before you say anything about Russell Westbrook, he's my favorite player. You could be hard of him, but I just want to make sure you know that. He's my favorite player. I go to war for that dude. And, you brought up stuff, we need guard help because, we was relying on Patty Mills in the playoffs in some situations, DeLon Wright with Terry dealing with the neck injury, and all that other stuff. So, and Tyler shown that I don't really trust him at the one. So we really need that backup position. Do you think Russ is a legit, like, an option for the Miami Heat? Do you think that happens? Do you think that's just a smoke screen? Do you think it's just a bunch of rumors, with the offseason being here and Heat are going to always be thrown at, somewhat big names all the time? Or do you think there's a chance that, Russ can opt out of his option deal with the Clippers and, look at Miami as a destination?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny. It's like you guys were eavesdropping before I got on the air with you. I explored a little bit of this today on the channel about the Russ thing, because I don't know if you probably saw the same thing, that Bovada had him as like the Heat are the favorite to land him. It's also interesting because it coincides with Nikola Jovic over the weekend saying that was his favorite player of all time. So that's kind of cool. Definitely not writing it off, because it's been a name that's always kind of circled and bantied about with the Heat. And I think the things that I like that Russ could bring to the table, first off, is like you have two guys at the top of your payroll in Jimmy and Tyler who have durability issues and miss regular season time. Kind of similar to what he was dealing with the Clippers. Like, he had to be in a place where he was more the filler. Like, he's filling in all these other spots when these guys can't necessarily go. So I think that there's a value in that, because this guy knows what it's like to be the leading scorer. He knows where to get his teammates involved. He's worked with skilled bigs. So I don't dismiss it. I don't know how happy Russ would be in a role like that again, because I don't know what he wants. I don't know if he wants to go to a place where he has a bigger role, because I don't, he probably, look how many guys it took to basically get him on the bench in LA. So I don't know how thrilled he would be, and I don't know how crazy the Heat are about bringing in another aging point guard like they did with Kyle Lowry, even though they're very different players. If that's something they're into, but you'd have a UCLA connection, his relationship with Kevin Love, the Jaime Jaquez. So you'd have like that little contingent there. I could see that being something that could be valuable to Miami for sure. I'm not against it. I think I'd be more for it than I would be against it. There's just questions about, his happiness that he would have here, because I think you're almost using, I can almost see Russ as like in spots being like a Band-Aid for Miami in big time spots if somebody goes down. And I don't know if that's something that's going to make him happy, or if he would be into doing that in a place like this.
Yeah, Russ does come with a lot. Trust me, I know him as my favorite player, so I know what he comes with, the positive and negative. But my second question would be, Outside of like the big whales, Donovan Mitchell, Murray, Trae Young, and stuff like that, we're going to be losing some big pieces this offseason with Caleb Martin and possibly Haywood Highsmith. And I think we all love Caleb Martin. Haywood Highsmith, I'm on the edge with. Outside of that playoff performance, I mean, 3 for 16 at the 3-point line. I believe around there was something that I noticed a lot. But I do think they're both going to get paid a lot of money, well deserved to them. But like, what's some options to replace them? Like, are we going to look at the draft with our 2 picks? Are we going to look at free agency? And I understand free agency is probably not the best. I mean, I'm looking at players like Lonnie Walker, and it's not really a replacement. Okogie, like, those are kind of the options that we're looking at, and also that we can afford. So like, are we going to go with Jamal Cain, Alonda Williams? Like, what direction do you think we're going to go to replace them? Because I do think if we don't trade anybody for a star, we're going to have Jaime there at least, and Jovic, but Caleb and Haywood are probably going to be gone. And those are, like I said earlier, some big losses.
Yeah, I think that, from Caleb's standpoint, I think that they'll be, from an offensive standpoint, okay, because the way I look at it is that's going to be a lot of like Jaime is going to be the spark next year, right? If he comes back, I think Jaime is going to be, the spark scorer, the main guy off the bench, the main guy who's going to provide the offense. It's going to probably feature him. He's going to be the Energizer Bunny. Obviously has to get better and more reliable as a shooter, just like Caleb Martin did. Threw him to the Wolves defensively last year, and they're really, I think he knows that he has to get better at it, but he's never scared of the challenge. He takes these things on. I think in those moments in the play-in and before he got hurt in the playoffs, like, you saw a guy who wasn't afraid of the moment. So I think that there's a lot of Caleb that's going to be okay with just the growth of Jaime Jaquez Jr. With Haywood being gone, like, who's that guy who's just going to be your specialist lock guys down? If they bring, DeLon back, I mean, DeLon can handle, I think, some of that stuff on the wing for sure. For bigger guys, I don't know. That's still a question remain. I really, really, really like Jamal Cain. As a player, I like his attitude. Has a bit of a cockiness to him that his teammates play about. Like, he really has a lot of strong belief in himself. He's like Haywood has been. He works with Karan Butler as his development coach, and Karan just seems to know how to infuse a lot of that greatness out of guys, especially when it comes to a shooting perspective. And I could see if I had to give somebody as an heir apparent to like the Sioux Falls system that's going to turn into something, I would guess him, just because he's one of those guys that will find offensive rebounds and putbacks and doesn't necessarily need the ball, but I think is also not scared to shoot in big moments. I don't necessarily know if he can provide the defensive pressure that Haywood could, because not few can. I mean, that's how great Haywood Highsmith is at defense. And Haywood looks like in tremendous shape this summer as well. Like, he looks like he's really revving himself up for whatever team he lands on. But if I had to guess, I would say Jamal's probably the guy as on the outskirts, and then the big guy they'll look for the production that they're going to lose with Caleb is just going to be more from Jaime Jaquez.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We also have a mid-level exception as well, so we don't have to go with the vet min guys to fulfill Caleb's role and Haywood. So who knows what we can get with that, if there's like a Valanciunas or a Obi Toppin or maybe a higher caliber type of free agent player that we can make that offer to. But anyway, Tobin, before we do close out, we want to thank you again so much for joining the podcast. Totally appreciate it. And we already assume that most of our audience is following your channel on YouTube, but if you're not, you guys got to follow Tobin on YouTube. And is there anything else you want to plug or shout out before we hop off?
No, if you guys like my content, you guys can watch it on YouTube for sure. It's at Tobin Show. And then weekdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. we're on, I do a radio show with my guy, Leroy Horde. Marcos, my producer, and Jafik, my video producer, all big Heat fans.
Leroy.
We're on the Heat's radio station. So, we'll do a lot of, we do 4 hours live every single day. We usually will talk Heat every single day at some point about something. I think today, because it's slim pickings right now, I think today we broke down Instagram posts from the Miami Heat, but we're just having fun. We're just waiting for this rat finals to end so we can get to the real business, because nobody really cares who wins between the Celtics and the Mavericks. We know what it is. Like, hopefully Boston loses, obviously, but I'm not thrilled that Mark Cuban's gonna win either. Like, that sucks.
It's a lose-lose.
It's a lose-lose. It's a lose-lose. There's more lose for Boston. Like, it hurts
Totally.
more, I guess, if Boston loses, but I don't, I've already hit them with like 9 asterisks anyway. I'm not going to count this championship. It doesn't matter. So I'm fully just waiting for this to conclude and we can get into the real fun of this offseason.
Yeah. Let's also hope that if Boston does win, which we're not rooting for, Drew Holiday is the finals MVP and Jason Tatum is not, so we could show that he is not that guy, even though the NBA wants to make him one of the 3 faces of the NBA. So I just hope he doesn't win the MVP. There'll be some consolation to that if Boston does win, but who knows? KP is out, so Porzingis is out tonight. That I just saw an alert like 30 minutes ago. Dallas is better at home. Maybe DJJ, former Miami Heat player, can have a big game tonight defensively and hit some corner threes. And let's just hope that Dallas can win. That's all I'm hoping for at this point, because I can't stand the Boston Celtics at this point. So, but anyway, Martel, any last words for you before we close out?
Thank you again, Tobin, for your time, and we definitely appreciate it. Make sure that you guys go to Tobin's channel, like, share, comment, subscribe, and thank you for all the support.
Thank you, guys.